So first up, are police to blame for not solving burglaries? New data shows that burglaries went unsolved in nearly half of all neighbourhoods in England and Wales over the past 3 years, whilst the number of charges also dropped. Now, this is despite a promise from police chiefs to attend every single case. So is this down to poor policing, or is it government spending cuts to blame? Then, should there be tougher fines for not clearing up dog mess? More than half of Brits say that they often see the unsightly waste, but is a £100 penalty enough of a deterrent? And also, should adult children who care for elderly parents get their more inheritance than their siblings? We're going to hear from a lawyer who represented a daughter in a landmark legal challenge against her 3 brothers for their mother's £1 million estate. Has your family faced a similar sort of divide over inheritance? And also, should we feel sorry for teenagers? It's a report from children's charity Bernardo's that shows issues like cost of living and climate change are taking such a toll that over half of teens think that they're going to be worse off than their parents. But is life actually harder for Generation Z? You can give us a call on 0207 862 2222. That's 0207 862 2222 on any of our talking points today. Calls from landlines may cost up to 16 pence per minute plus any call set-up fees, and calls from mobiles may cost considerably more. To send us a message, head to Facebook or X, formerly known as Twitter, search for Jeremy Vine on 5, and then we'll pop up and you can use the hashtag StormHuntley. All right, let's get into our first topic then. And are police to blame for not solving burglaries? New data has sparked fury across the country after it is revealed that police failed to solve a single burglary in neighbourhoods across nearly half of England and Wales in the past 3 years. Now, this is despite promise from all 43 police chiefs in England and Wales to attend every single break-in. Home Office figures also show that the number of burglaries resulting in a charge also fell to just under 4%. So now, is this simply down to poor policing, or is government spending cuts to blame? Get your calls in for this. 0207 862 2222 is that number. Matt, I'll start with you. What do you think is to blame for these failings?
So I feel really strongly about this. I'd say I actually feel quite angry about it. And I've been burgled twice, once where I live now, so I've really had to up security, and once in my old flat. It's something that no one wants to happen. It feels like an invasion.
And did anything happen as a result of those burglaries? Was anybody caught, charged?
The police turned up. As far as I know, neither of those burglaries were solved. Luckily, I don't have very much worth stealing, but it's still something really unpleasant to happen to you. I'm sure every single person can relate to that watching this afternoon or this morning. Either they would have been burgled or someone they know or love would have been. And it's the most basic thing, isn't it, that our police should not only respond to such a crime, but also you have at least a stab at solving it. But I'm reluctant to blame the police. No doubt some police forces are better than others. For me, the buck stops with the government. This has been a Conservative government now for 14 years. What did they do in 2010? They absolutely slashed policing. They robbed us of 20,000 police officers. Yes, they've been building them back up, but our population has grown. So simply building them back up isn't enough. And something else as well, you're taking away all of that experience. So even though they've been building up the police numbers, although they've recently fallen actually in recent months, but overall they have been getting back to roughly where they were. But that's since 2019, so you still lost that experience. It still takes police officers a while to kind of get up to speed. So for me, the buck stops with the government.
What do you think, Ali?
I think Matt makes some good points. He's right that the numbers of police were slashed in 2010. They now have come back pretty much in line to where they were, but retention and recruitment of police officers remains a serious challenge. And it is true that the population has also increased, so there's more crime going on generally as well when you have more people around. That's obviously the case. Now, however, I do believe that if you've got 48% of burglaries not actually going anywhere, not resulting in any sort of conviction rate at all, only 4% of burglaries resulting in a charge, that is appalling. I've also been burgled twice, once in my house in West London where I was brought up, and then when I moved to East London about 20 years ago, I was burgled again with members of my family in the house. Very, very scary. And in fact, in that particular case, to be fair to the police, they did come and take fingerprints, and they were there on the scene very quickly. They couldn't get the apprehender who was on the top floor of the house, and if I'd gone up with a cricket bat and hit him, I would have been in prison if he fell to his death. I'm assuming it was a he. They then actually found this perpetrator some months later, and the police called me to say, we've found the burglar, but we've cut a sort of deal with this individual because he's given us information on some other crimes, so we're not going to take it further. I said, well, at least thanks for calling me. But what does it do if you're a victim of crime?
How did that make you feel? Was that good policing?
Well, look, I'm happy that they apprehended the individual. And back when this happened, it was probably about 99 when this happened to me, probably about 24 years ago, shortly after I moved to East London. The police, to be fair, were on the scene within minutes. And they were really annoyed that they couldn't actually find this person. They were all over the property. And so fair, but would that happen now? Probably not. Now you'd probably just get a crime reference number and go on your merry way to your insurance company.
OK, so you're blaming the police force. You say there's a real issue, and there is, in recruitment and retention of policing. But is that down to police, or is that down to lack of funding, which just makes being a police officer undesirable?
Well, I think it is partly down to funding. I think funding is certainly an issue, but I think you can't just blame it solely on funding alone. I also think that when you have a situation where it's national headline news, which was the case just a few months ago, when police chiefs around the country were saying, we will investigate every crime where there is a reasonable lead. For that to be front page news, you've got to wonder what country we're living in. I thought that was the point of having the police, that they wouldn't follow up every lead. I mean, look, I've had my car stolen, my house burgled twice, the roof of one of my cars, which I don't even drive anymore, I just gave it up, slashed twice.
I can't work out whether this is the state of the country or just very unlucky, Ali.
Maybe I'm very unlucky, but I don't know. Maybe I am. But I mean, when you come out of your house in the morning and your car's not there, you just think, right, what do? You call the police. What do they give you? A crime reference number and the link to victim support.
My granny would be going, oh, I remember the day you could just leave the back door open. You just leave the front door open, it'd be fine. I mean, I don't think anyone remembers those days, and it is not to be done.
But there are countries where that does happen. And if you go to Singapore, for example, I mean, you cross the road and you're chewing gum, you're going to be told what's what. We are a bit lenient here.
So we need to get tougher. Do let us know if you had any experience with the police when it comes to burglaries. 0207 862 2222. We'd love to know who you think is to blame. I mean, another source of complaint for the police, I suppose, although they might not be doing the actual complaining, is all the protests that we're seeing and the fact that police resources have to go to that, as well as being social workers as well. It's almost like they're spreading themselves too thin. Now, is that the police's fault?
Well, we know in recent weeks, very controversially, and I've condemned this, that Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, has been accused of losing control of the streets and worse. But he's crying out for more funding from the Home Office. And police chiefs are seriously concerned about the fact that so many police officers are being drained from local communities on the weekends, and yet you'll still get someone like me who says we should have the right to protest. So these are really difficult, challenging balances to get right in a democracy. It is so staggering that in nearly half of all neighbourhoods, to go back to our headline point, nearly half of all neighbourhoods, there hasn't been a single burglary solved in the last 3 years. What is going wrong? Partly, it seems, police are being asked to do so many different things now, box ticking, scrubbing out people's names so that they don't breach data protection laws, that sort of thing, as well as protests and all the rest of it. So they are having an enormous amount of pressure put on them. They need to be properly resourced. We need to have enough police officers. If we don't have confidence in our police, whether, like me, you primarily blame the government, or maybe like Ali, you're a bit more critical of the police, then society starts to break down. If you don't feel that when you dial 999, you're going to get a proper response. And not just that someone will turn up like these police chiefs have pledged, but actually that they will follow through. We've got Ring doorbells now, right? We've got so much CCTV in a city like London, and no doubt in other cities as well. How is this possible? Let's
go to the phone lines and find out from our viewers their experiences and who they think's to blame. Bob from Derby, you're up first. What's your thoughts or experience with burglaries?
Good morning. Yes, it's not just inside the house. Burglaries happen outside the house. For example, my son has got a motorbike. So about 3ish in the morning, under cover of darkness, a short while ago, about 3 hoodies came. They had scooters. This was all filmed on camera as they were doing it, and they just didn't care. They just looked up and smiled at it, and the hoodies and that. They couldn't. I mean, at the end of the day, if they didn't get the bike, they'd be running away anyway or scootering off. So anyway, we got the police. The police caught them in the act. They broke the steering lock on the bike, and they wheeling it down the road, and they were caught red-handed.
Okay.
And you can't get better than that. And lo and behold, 3 weeks later, obviously we went for prosecution because we want these people off the streets because they're regulars. Then we thought, this is it now. This will start the ball rolling. That few weeks later, we got a letter from the CPS saying it is not in the public interest at this time to prosecute them. And that was it, basically. They stuck their fingers up at us and all of the people in the area, basically, by not doing anything about it. Of course, I wrote a stiff letter to CPS, but of course, I never got a reply as expected.
Bob, that must be very disappointing. Just to clarify the definitions, what you're talking about there is theft and not burglary. But I mean, very frustrating. I heard of someone who also had a bike stolen. He found it on Gumtree, so he had the address of the individual that had the bike, and the police basically said they don't have enough resources to go get it. Now, that was a few years ago, and it was in London. But incredibly frustrating. What if, Bob, you found out that actually the CPS had other information or were using these individuals to catch higher up criminals, if you like? Would you then think that that's maybe fair dues and good policing?
I can see where you're coming from there, but as far as I'm concerned, for me, it was just catching them for what they did or tried to do to me. We never got them we never got any compensation for the breaking the bike's lock chain or anything. Like, it's quite expensive, motorbike locks, steering locks. But the parents, obviously, if they were under 18, parents should have paid. But nothing was said about it. And they're still hanging about. They're still around the area. No one's done anything about them.
So, Bob, I suppose
still smiling up at the cameras, yeah.
Bob, I suppose the overarching question here is, who's to blame for that then? Do you think that it is the police and bad policing, or is the government just underfunding police so that we can't? Or I suppose the Crime Prosecution Service, by the sounds of things, Bob?
It's a bit of each, but I think they think there's bigger fish to fry, and they're not taking this seriously. They think we're not doing our own security. We are doing our own. We've got thick locks on the bikes and everything.
I mean, one lock should do, really, Bob. We just shouldn't have as many people running around stealing things. By the sounds of things, at quite a professional level. I should say we've had a response from the Home Office. A Home Office spokesperson has said, since 2010, our communities are safer with neighbourhood crimes, including burglary, robbery and theft, down 48%, and violent crime down 51%, with more police officers in England and Wales than ever before. I think that stat might be questioned. We have been clear that police must take a zero tolerance approach to all crimes and get the basics right. You can debate whether that's been happening. We welcome the police's commitment to attend the scene of every home burglary and to pursue all reasonable lines of inquiry to ensure more criminals are caught and justice is delivered for victims. Do you think it sounds like that's what the police are doing, Matt?
I just can't believe that this was even a debate, the idea that the police might not attend the scene of every burglary. This is our home, and an Englishman's home is our castle, right? Yeah.
But even though that they have committed to this, Ali, it's still not following on to charges. So essentially what we're looking at in these stats, there are parts of the country where burglary has been decriminalised.
Well, that's exactly the point. I don't know if Bob's still on the line. Is Bob still there?
Bob will still be there.
Bob, let me ask you something, because you're talking about the experience of being a victim of crime, the fact that there was CCTV footage and nothing's actually been done about it. Do you feel, I mean, there was once a thing called the broken window theory, that if you actually see a broken window, if you don't fix it, the whole area sort of degenerates and becomes rife with crime. Do you think that the failure of the police to solve crimes like yours actually leads to the why do we bother reporting anything kind of society that we're now living in?
That's a fascinating question. Unfortunately, Bob did leave the line quite a while ago after he had said, OK, you go.
I'll answer the question myself. The answer is yes. I mean, you look at burglaries, you look at shoplifting, you look at all of this stuff. If you're now going into a world where even in my local supermarket, people are now having to sit behind 3-inch massively reinforced glass, which is the case, by the way, and it's very difficult to get your milk bottle under the thing to even be scanned properly, because I prefer talking to people rather than using the scanner. This is the world we're living in now, where people are having to wear body cams in shops, burglaries are not being solved, people feel that if they report something, there is literally no point. You're going to end up here with either people not bothering or a vigilante society, both of which are highly undesirable.
Terrifying. If something bad is happening in your neighbourhood and you ring 999, as I have, and you don't get an answer for 4 minutes or so, that leads to societal breakdown. It is a government's primary responsibility to keep us safe from foreign external threats, but also to keep us safe internally.
I do
in our
wonder whether
communities.
it's also that's a sort of a chicken and egg situation, and whether we have seen society break down and we get this sort of crime and then the police can't solve it because there's too much. I don't know. Edward from Ascot, you're up next. What's your experience with this?
Yeah, I'm an ex-detective who run burglary squads in London, and catching burglars is notoriously difficult. Burglars are aware of our tactics and how we gain evidence to prosecute them. So even if you've got CCTV in your house, they wear disguises. If forensically they're aware, so you don't get fingerprints because they wear gloves. If you're lucky, they might cut themselves and you might get some DNA evidence.
But Edward, isn't this, if they've already worked out your policing tactics, isn't it then the responsibility of the police to create other tactics and other ways of catching them?
We do have other tactics because one burglar will commit 100 burglaries in a month. So we know who the burglars are, but to put a surveillance team on them is not cost effective. You're looking at 12 officers, 24 hours a day, following a burglar who is also tactically aware of surveillance teams.
But what about, we hear these sort of anecdotes or experiences from people a lot, like our previous caller who said that these criminals were caught red-handed and the CPS basically said it's not in our interest to prosecute. Why is that happening?
Well, what would happen is, if you catch a prolific burglar and he's committed 100 burglaries, when he is interviewed, he will be asked about the other 99 plus the one he's been caught at. And quite often, the CPS will come to an agreement that he will accept that he committed the other offences, and they will lay on file. So though he's been found guilty of them, but he won't necessarily get any more sentence. So, and that's a way of clearing up, as we used to technically call it, clearing up burglaries, but without any real punishment for the offender.
Yeah, so but why are we not punishing the offenders then, Edward? Have you got any insight to that?
Unfortunately, that wasn't my job. That's a CPS's job.
That's very honest of you, Edward.
I could understand it, Edward. Sorry, I was going to say I could understand it, Edward, if it was a plea bargain type situation where, OK, you give us information on these 50 robberies over here and we'll let you off these ones that we know you've done. Like in the case where they found my burglar of my house and nothing happened. That I would understand. But simply not bothering, that I struggle with.
Yeah, I wonder whether it could be so that the police and everyone can put a line under the other burglaries and we know what happened there, or it's a way of keeping people out of jail because they're also full. I mean, we could look at the court system and maybe potentially blame that. I don't know, but there's so many avenues you could go down. But at the moment, yeah, it's not looking good if your house is burgled. Edward, thank you so much for your call and your insight on that. Thanks for all your calls.